Now that's a tasty snack. Welcome back to another Nihongo Gamer video. I'm very excited about unboxing this. It's from Junkfood Arcades. It's a SnackBox Micro. And as you know, I'm a big fan of arcade sticks on this channel, but I'm also a fan of just playing on controllers that are small and convenient, like on pad. But recently, I've been playing on controllers like these. It's a button box with a D-pad which is split into 4 separated buttons. And although I'm really proud of the monstrosity that I've created here, as you can see, it's still not that portable and won't fit in my pocket. That's why I'm very excited about this, the SnackBox Micro, which, as you can see, in this tiny box, there's a controller that's even tinier. So let's go ahead and get it out the box. Junkfood Arcades makes a number of other arcade controllers, but this is the one that they make, which is a button box controller, and it's teensy weensy from the pictures that I've seen so far. Let's get it out of the box. It's not there yet. I really wish more arcade stick manufacturers would actually have the front of the controller like greet you as soon as you open the box. I just love how much this feels like a pizza box. All right, let's take it out of the packaging. Feast your eyes on the SnackBox Micro. It's upside down. That is even smaller than I thought it was going to be, and lighter as well. Unbelievable. This thing is the cutest controller I think I've ever laid my eyes on. This thing is absolutely minuscule, but as you can see, it's basically the same size of button and layout as this button box controller that I've been using and I made in a separate video. But the difference in thickness is quite dramatic. I am blown away by how tiny this thing is. I think the main thing you need to know about this controller is that this is the size of a standard arcade button, which is why it's difficult to make a controller that's much thinner than this because it uses standard arcade buttons. So what is the sorcery that allows arcade-style buttons to fit in a controller this slim? Well, since these button box controllers don't use arcade-style levers, which have mechanisms which are, quite deep, they can place all the buttons of the controller directly on the PCB. So inside this controller is a printed circuit board, which is completely flat, and on top of that, they place the buttons directly on the board. And in addition to that, they're not just normal keyboard switches, they're low-profile keyboard switches. But enough of the science behind the controller. What you really want is to hear the switches. Ho ho ho! That's nice! This is the first time I've had an arcade controller that I think sounds cute. Just listen to this. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and the main one you probably want to know is, could you really put this on your lap and play with this comfortably? Let's find out right now. This is the SnackBox Micro, and on my lap it is about this big. So if you have your legs coming straight out, you can already see this is pretty much the extent of how far you'd want to expand your legs. If you were to go a little further, this controller very quickly will fall straight through your lap. So generally speaking, you're going to have your legs coming straight forward or maybe just slightly spread out like this, but not really too far. And of course, with your legs together completely, it's going to be just fine. With an arcade stick, when you're moving this stick a lot like this, you need to have a big, heavy piece of equipment that won't shift around, because obviously if the controller shifts too much as you move, then when you go down to do a different input, then the switches will actually be physically in a different place. But with a controller like this, because all of the motion, none of the motion is lateral, which would be shifting the controller sideways, all of the motion of a controller like this is going from up and down, and that doesn't really shift it side to side out of your lap. So really, to an extent, even if you are kind of lounging around like this with the controller kind of sideways like this, you can see it just won't move anyway, even if it's like kind of falling through my lap like this. To an extent, as long as it's sandwiched in between, as long as it's sandwiched in between my legs like this, it's not going to go anywhere. One more thing I want to point out while I'm just testing this on my lap for the first time is also I'm noticing that this is a really nice arm position. Now, there's a number of controllers that do their best to be as slim as possible so that you've got a good arm position, and maybe you need like a place to rest your wrist for something like an arcade stick. When I first built this controller, it was even thicker, but as you can see, I actually sawed off the bottom half of the controller so that it would sit a little bit lower. But even at this position, you can see my arm is going down and then it's coming forward, but it's kind of slanting up a little bit. And then in addition to that, you generally don't want to have your hands like resting on the controller, because I feel like you just end up with a lot of arm pain and wrist pain as a result. To block, you're often pressing like one button for a very long time while you're pressing other buttons. And so you've locked your finger into this position. And so you want to have as few points on your body which are locked into awkward positions so that you're not causing too much tension and stress in your muscles. For now, all I just want you to know is that I really like the arm position that you can do with this controller because it is so thin. I love the fact that there is nothing here. There's no space between this button and this edge right here, because that means I can bring it all the way up to my body. Even if I want to have my arms going a little bit further back and then coming out like this, I can have it right up against my body, and that's absolutely no problem. Now I'm going to be showing you some gameplay and going through the more specific details of the controller, but first of all, it looks like an ice cream sandwich. I'm pretty sure this was done on purpose, and I think it looks great. And I guess also calling it the snack box, so there's definitely like the food thing going on, but actually it looks even thinner than any ice cream sandwich I've ever had. This is the controller from the front. You've got all of your direction buttons, left, down, right, jump, and then you've got all of your punch buttons and your kick buttons over here. And then here at the top row is this mysterious arrangement of select and options and home buttons. Now they look like they would be kind of weird gummy switches, but they're actually very solid switches, just so you can hear. When I first saw photos of this, I thought like they'd be weird and gummy, but they're actually very solid. If you're interested to know what these unlabeled buttons actually are, there's an options button, select and share, home, touchpad, R3, L3, and then this final button here is an LED edit mode. Apparently this thing has LED lights in it, so let's go ahead and plug it in and see if the lights just come on automatically. Lights, camera, action. What? Whoa, and it's doing a whole light show. Check this out. We gotta turn the lights down for this. Hold on a sec. There we go. Oh, yes. Check it out. It's going crazy. That is actually insane. Including a feature like this in a controller, as standard for $200, it's already got the one feature it needed to have, which is being ultra tiny. And then it just has this bonus. What is this light show? Is just hilarious. I don't really understand. Apparently there's a tutorial on how to customize these lights. One of the main things you need to know about these buttons is that they're like a custom 3D printed button made by Layershift for this company, Junkfood Custom Arcades. And they're not convex. Normally with arcade buttons, you can see they've got this kind of convex shape. They're kind of bubbly and round on the top. But going with the whole keyboard theme of the SnackBox Micro, apparently the default buttons that this unit ships with at the moment are concave buttons. And apparently this is to emulate the feel of a keyboard. I'll be very curious to see whether I actually like these buttons, because one of the main things that's nice about arcade buttons is that they're big enough that you can double tap. But at the moment it feels pretty good, so actually I'm getting the feeling like that's not going to be much of a big deal. And although I say they're concave, they're like very, very subtly concave. You can see there's like a millimeter or less of concavity to it. And underneath each one of these buttons is a Kale Chalk V1 low profile key switch. And this is probably the most common layout for a button box controller, having smaller buttons up here and a bigger button down here. Now, turning the controller around to the back, you can see there are 5 screws holding it in place, and all over the bottom, I am so happy because this is something that is so easily overlooked, but this controller has non-slip padding all over the bottom. Now, apart from that, there's not a whole lot going on. It's basically the buttons, the options buttons, and a port to plug it in. So it's very deceptively simple, but on the inside, it has what I think is running a custom sort of Brook board. You can plug it into your PS4, so a Nintendo Switch, and then on top of that, you've got flashing lights. It's a really interesting design language to make it look like the controller has nothing going on, but then when you use it, it's like there is a lot going on in this controller. But one thing we need to test before we actually plug it in, the pocket test. Does it fit in my pocket? And the answer is sort of. I mean, yes, it does fit in your pocket, but obviously it's a little bit too long to fit in a back pocket. How about my front pocket? Struggling with the front pocket? No! Brilliant! It does sort of fit in my front pocket, and then if I were to put my shirt over it like this, hey, not bad! Not bad at all. Is that an arcade stick in your pocket, or are you just happy to play fighting games? Alright, as you can see, I've got Street Fighter booted up. It's time to try out the SnackBox Micro. I'm mega excited about this, and I think it really helps that it's just got these flashing lights. It's completely unnecessary, but at the same time, it's so flash, and I just love it. But let's actually press some buttons. So first, let's do our directions. Pressing forwards and backwards, absolutely no problem there. Pressing down, pressing jump, not a problem. So I can jump forwards, jump backwards, do a special move. I can press a punch, I can press a kick. Alright, we're in business. The main thing that I've noticed about these buttons that's completely different to every controller I've tried so far is that they're not plastic. They're just this weird 3D printed button with a texture on it. So the first thing that I want to point out is that it's got this concave button feel, and I want to see how I like that. does feel a little bit strange at first, but at the same time, it means it will feel more natural for people who are coming from something like, you know, like this, like a gaming keyboard, because most keyboards tend to have concave buttons. But gameplay-wise so far, I'm not finding any sort of weird disadvantages to having concave buttons, because again, even though they're concave, they're very subtly concave. You can barely see, but it's like literally half a millimeter of concavity. So just mashing a few buttons here definitely doesn't feel like it's going to be an issue having concave buttons. This feels really nice, actually. I really like it. But one thing that does interest me is how is it going to feel over like a long period of time of playing, having textured buttons. Now, I don't know if this is like an artifact of the 3D printing process, but instead of having a nice smooth texture here, it's got like a texture to it. Although that feels quite nice here at the start, I don't know how that's going to feel over time. Like, is it going to feel kind of abrasive? Because when I press buttons like this, there's a lot of rubbing over a texture. But it's early days, and who knows, maybe it won't actually make much of a difference over time. Alright, I actually want to change the stage we're on, and I just noticed that I have to press this button here to go to the options menu, and it is minuscule. You can definitely feel for it and press it without looking down, but it doesn't feel nice to press. This is quite it feels exactly like it looks like it feels. It feels like someone chopped off some plastic and it's kind of jutting out incorrectly. It's not painful, but it doesn't feel like a smooth button. As you can see, all of these buttons look kind of different. So if you're the type of person that's in training mode and you're constantly pressing like the touchpad button to reset, you're going to start feeling it in your finger over hours of play, because you're going to start feeling like there's like an indentation in your finger. So I think maybe personally in a different design of the controller, I'd like to see these buttons feel like nicer to press rather than being these kind of plastic extrusions from the controller. But again, that's only for training mode. When you're actually playing in a match, or for example, like when you're in a tournament, the only buttons you actually really press are directions and action buttons. I've been playing for a few more minutes here, and one thing that I do want to point out is that this size of controller is actually fine. I think the first time you look at a size controller like this, you're like, oh no, that's never going to fit in my lap because it's just going to fall in between. But basically, even if you have your legs kind of like this, it actually doesn't really need much space. It's not going anywhere. One thing I did notice though is that because the controller is so small, like small adjustments in my legs, like while I'm playing, I just kind of shift my legs, you know, side to side or up and down. It just feels like it makes more of a difference to this controller, because at this distance, a small inclination of my right leg causes the whole controller to move. Whereas if I had my legs out further like this, then a small inclination of my leg seems to have like less of an angled inclination effect on the controller. So that's just like a weird side effect of playing with your legs closer together. But you absolutely don't have to play with your legs completely straight like this. You can have your legs spread out like this, and there's absolutely no issue with doing so. Now, if you are really having an issue with the size of the controller, you could just put a magazine on your leg that's a little bit wider, and you could balance the controller like on a magazine or some sort of tray that you can go to like a furniture store and buy one of those like dinner trays. Obviously, you're gonna look like a ridiculous person with a with a TV dinner tray on your lap at a tournament. But who knows, maybe that could be part of the customization. You could show up to your tournament with your funky controller with the flashing lights, and then you could also have like the, I don't know, JCPenney dinner tray on your lap. As for the switches that are being used underneath these button caps, I believe they're Kale Chalk V1 low profile switches. And they feel nice and light. You don't have to put a lot of pressure in to press them down. Obviously, the big benefit of using low profile Kale switches is that you can actually hot swap them in and out. They're not soldered to the board, apparently. You can actually take these button caps off, pull the switch out, and just slide in a new one. One thing I should point out is that because they are the chalk switches, they don't use this shape of cap. This is the standard like Cherry MX Plus shape cap, but the low profile switches in here, they use like an equals sign. So the key switches are super easy to swap out if you want to get more clicky switches or switches with a tactile bump in them. But what might be a little bit more difficult to replace are these button caps. These are custom made by Layer Shift for Junkfood Custom Arcade, and they use that equal sign shape instead of that plus shape, which is used for Cherry MX switches. I'll tell you one thing though, these switches sound really nice. Just come and listen to this. It's not high-pitched, but it's also not low-pitched. It's kind of mid-range key click. I saw that in an Alex Myers video. One more cool side effect of having a controller this small with no wrist space is that you won't be tempted to rest your hand on it. Like tension here and tension here. Hovering your hands over the controller is just going to cause you a whole lot less pain than if you try to like rest your hand on something. So as a sort of side effect, it's kind of nice that you're not able to injure yourself because there's nowhere to injure yourself. If you do insist on resting your palms somewhere, this controller is so thin that even if you put your hand on the controller and you rest your palms on your legs, it's actually so thin that basically there's no height difference between the buttons and your wrist. So it's almost like this controller doesn't even need wrist rests because your legs just are your new wrist rests. But like I said before, you probably want to avoid resting your wrists or locking them into any sort of position like that while you're playing. Just my personal observation. Now with regards to double tapping, which I haven't been doing as much of lately, I thought maybe the concave shape was going to be a bit weird for double tapping on this controller. I find that the concaveness is not that pronounced, and so double tapping is not an issue, but while double tapping, you do this kind of swiping motion on the key, and you definitely feel the texture. I will be very curious to hear from people who've had one of these controllers for a longer amount of time, but it's still early days for this controller. Who knows? Maybe they'll come out with smooth buttons in the future. Now, I imagine a lot of people who are interested in this controller may have never seen a button box controller before, and I don't have time to explain all the ins out of button box controllers and what makes them good and what makes them bad. But here are a couple things that you can do with a button box controller that are kind of harder on other controllers. The first one is that while you're holding forward, you can just press a button and go straight into a dash without having much of a delay. Normally you would have to press forward twice, and then so you kind of like stutter before you do the dash. But with a button box, you can be already holding forward, quickly tap backwards, and then you go straight into your dash, which is kind of scary when you're online. The other one that I think is probably the most common is being able to go straight into a dragon punch without pressing the same button twice. So you go 1, 2, 3. Like that to do a dragon punch, instead of going 1, lift off, 2, 3 to do a dragon punch normally. All well and good, but there's one thing that is a little bit difficult to get used to, and it's the fact that when you press left and right, if you aren't very, very careful, if you press right and left at the same time, you're not blocking, you're in complete neutral. And that's something that an arcade stick would normally just take care of for you. When you're pressing left, when you go to right, you're incapable of pressing left at the same time. But on a controller like this, there's a new kind of danger that seeps in. Obviously, you can learn to get around that, but it's just something that you need to be careful of when you first join the world of button box controllers. I just can't get over how colorful this controller is. Look at the rainbow! Alright, for no other reason other than I just kind of feel like it, I decided to load up Them's Fightin' Herds. Let's load up a combo, shall we? Alright. I love this game. One more cool thing I'm noticing about a controller that is this small is that you can do what I've always loved about pad controllers. When you've got a pad controller, one of the main things that I do with this is when I'm relaxing and just playing games for fun. And often you actually see pros holding their controllers down like this when they're playing. It's just really nice and comfortable to have your arms kind of sinking down in between your legs, or sometimes you're playing with your arms underneath your legs. Thing is, when you're holding a giant arcade stick, you can't really kind of slouch like this to play because, like, you know, the lever gets into the wrong angle and everything. But when you've got a button box controller, because basically all you have to do is just press the button, you don't need to be like shifting into like complicated positions. You can actually just kind of like relax into your chair like this and have your controller down here, and you can still press all of the buttons. This is the ultimate controller for lazy bums like me. And what arcade controller test would be complete without a playthrough of the game that I will shill until the end of time, Undernight Inbirth Exhalate CLR. Alright, since we've discovered that this is clearly a fantastic controller for lazy bums like myself, let's see just how lazy we can get with this controller and still be able to do these combos. What other silly positions can we play this game in? How about this? The sandwich! Alright, what about cross-legged? Alright, how about in the air with no lap? The button boxers. Pad players, we're coming for you. And last but not least, I think it doesn't really need to be demonstrated, but as you can see, with a controller this slim, it's going to be very easy to play on your desk, because if your desk is already at a fairly good height for you, this adds like no height, and your hands aren't going to be like hovering really high up, because this is basically about, you know, hand thickness off your desk, and you're right here. In fact, if you really want to, you could rest your palms on your desk while you play. In fact, I keep saying not to do it, but let's actually try it. Let's rest our palms on the desk and let's see if we can do this combo. The controller's so thin that it's basically like just typing on a gaming keyboard. And actually that opens up one more interesting thing, which is that if this controller is so slim, it means that you can now use your own choice of wrist rest, where rather if there were a wrist rest built into the controller, you would have to use that because it's, you know, plastic or whatever this 3D printed material is. But because there's nothing here where your palms go on the controller, you can actually use whatever you want. So I've just got this random iPhone case lying around, which is kind of nice and soft. You could actually use this as a wrist rest if you wanted. Just place this here in front of the controller. And use your own custom wrist rest, whatever you want. You know what you should do is you should get one of those anime waifu mouse pads and then rest your wrists on that while you're playing. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for the Junkfood Custom Arcades SnackBox Micro. I've got to say, I love this thing to bits. I love everything about it, but there are some things you should know about this controller. There are a number of different options now available to you if you want to get a button box controller. And in addition to that, you can also build your own controller. But these controllers that are this slim are very difficult to build yourself because they put the switches directly onto the PCB. And for using these low profile switches, they actually had to make their own custom button caps that would actually fit these low profile switches, because like I said before, they use a different slightly different shape to like the button caps that you would get for a gaming keyboard, which are like plus shaped. So there are definitely button boxes out there for the more traditional arcade stick fan who want to like put in whatever buttons they want. But if you want a controller which is basically as small as it's going to get, if you want a controller that also has some flashing lights on it, if you want a controller that is just flash and it's just super cute, just look at this thing, it looks like an Oreo, then this controller is definitely for you. And what I love most about it is that it is actually quite thoughtful. Even though the main thing about this controller is to just be as slim as possible and as small as possible, so you can put this thing in your pocket. In addition to that, it is actually thoughtful where it really counts. First of all, this button is as close as possible to the edge so that you've got a choice of what you do with your wrists, whether you rest it on your desk, or you have your own wrist rest, or you just don't use a wrist rest at all, you just hover your hands over the controller. You know, it's light, but it doesn't shift around too much. It's got non-slip padding all over the bottom. Mine actually came with 2 USB cables, and this one is the longer of the 2, and it feels significantly long enough. I'll just do a throw test. It gets almost all the way over to that wall over there, so I'm guessing it's something like, I don't know, 9 feet long. It's not too light, it's not too heavy, but more importantly, the best thing I like about this controller is non-slip padding all over the bottom. I'm just kidding, that's not my favorite feature. Finally, people who want to use a controller with big arcade style buttons now have a controller that's, one, portable enough that we can just carry it around in our pockets. In fact, it's slimmer than a pad. But the thing I love the most about this controller is just that this is perfect for a lazy person like me, because I love to play fighting games, but I don't always want to be in tournament mode and like staring at the screen super intently and getting ready to play. Sometimes I just want to like laze back in my chair, put myself in ultimate sort of laid back mode, like, you know, balancing it on my leg like this. Now, the only reservation I have about this controller is the, you know, style of these button caps. Although actually they do feel really nice. I've only been playing it for like a short hour or so to make this video, but over time I just don't see the benefit of having buttons with a texture to them. So if in the future, if it's possible to design buttons that are smooth, that don't cause like abrasion on your finger when you're double tapping on them, personally I'd like to see that. But you know, from the short testing that I've done so far, it doesn't hurt at all, and I doubt that actually even over a long time I don't think it's going to hurt that much. And actually, design wise, I liked the concave shape of these buttons. Like I mentioned before, it's not a very deep concave shape. It's a very shallow concave shape, but it does feel quite nice. Like your fingers do kind of like slip into the right positions that they want to be. I get that the design idea is that you're going to rest your fingers on these concave buttons and they're just going to feel like they're in the right place. But the thing is, people who play on button boxes, I think you'll find that most people don't rest their fingers on the buttons the whole time while playing. So this is completely my personal opinion, but I don't think that having concave buttons and, you know, going for the whole laying your fingers on the keyboard switches and leaving them there, I don't think that design idea is really as important as they thought it was. But it does feel nice, and the concaveness is so shallow that if you come from standard Sunwell buttons, you're not going to take very long to adjust to these buttons at all. Just listen to this click. So nice. I think this controller is absolutely fantastic, but there's a couple things I do want to check out in the future. First of all, they sent me this. This is called the heavy metal plate. It's just a really heavy piece of metal with a non-slip pad, and it's for people who find that the controller is slipping around too much, but generally speaking, there's no lateral motion with button boxes anyway, so really it's probably not going anywhere. And the other thing I want to do is a more in-depth look at the LEDs, because clearly that is going to be fun, customizing the LED colors of the buttons and the way that they react when you press them. So I'll definitely be checking that out in the future, but for now, don't forget to comment on this video. Let me know what you think of these tiny form factor controllers. Do you think this is a mistake having them this small, or is this actually ideal to have controllers that are big arcade buttons but in a super portable package? Let me know in the comments section below. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe as soon as you can to get notifications of when new videos go up. You can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Twitch, and hopefully I'll be using this in future streams to, you know, you can ask me questions about how I'm finding it over time. That's all for now, and I'll see you in the next Nihongo Gamer video.
What am I doing with my life?